go. Um, so now I'm Jim Driver. I think I've met most of you, but not all. There's a few folks in here. I'm the founder of the Balanced Work Life Company, and over the years, I've coached a lot of executive and managers. This is actually a great week. We had two of our clients just started high level senior positions, global implications to them, fabulous career moves. So we're really quite excited. And it really got us reflecting a lot going into this session, but what we learned from that and how the principles that I'm going to share with you today really applied to helping them get their jobs. And it was kind of interesting. One was an oh my God moment when their position disappeared, and 5 months later they're in a new, bigger and better job. In fact, another one actually took almost 14, 16 months to get there, and they were coming from a position that you'll recognize when we get a little bit later about I got to get out of here. I'm just not in a panic. So they were both kind of in very interesting situations, but typical to the fact that there isn't a typical career change situation. Now, Bryce, that's online, he leads the marketing for us. He created My Careertopia back in February. We now got over 1,000 people on that blog, and most of them taking the e-courses on matching themselves to the job and how they really, because the whole point here is you not only want a job, but you really want to thrive on it. So he's a great
Yeah,
writer.
how many of you in this webinar are familiar with Microtopia or came to this because of that? I just want to kind of get a feel for who's here from that audience as well. Go ahead and type in chat if you are. Say yes or something.
uh, Gwen and Ted and Tom
Sweet.
and Christina. Good. So we got a real balance here
Tom.
between the old historical clients that have been with me for years and their and the spinoff from them in the work. So here's a little quiz we're going to start with just to see. Um, oh, I gave you.
Yep, we can see it, Jim. It's looking good.
Yeah.
So the question here is, how ready do you feel you are for your next position? Go ahead and answer that, and then we'll see how this results. Cool.
Okay. People changing their mind as they go. I thought that's kind of interesting. So, it, so I just think that really shows that the fact there's 100% of people being ready is really rare. Most of the time, we've got an idea, but what we have to do is, and a little thing we find out about Adobe is when you switch back and forth to polls, you also have to
Start the webcam again.
yeah. When I took you to a poll, I really took you to the second poll I had planned to use, little slip of the thing, which was really this. And I think we got that, that you're up to the challenge, but what most of you feel is you need to know what's out there. So that gives me a little bit of a flavor for where we'll be tracking. This was a burning platform that I think drives a lot of people. We use this chart on the LinkedIn one as well because most people in the last webinar fessed up to this being the case, that they're in a company that will do restructuring or has done restructuring. Company's going to be, acquired. They're going to have to change positions. It's, the whole point of this one is really, are you change ready? This is the thing that I think is on everybody's mind and certainly on mine, because it isn't something when something happens, there is a certain degree of shock if you lose your job and you need to or just you need to move on to another one. So the point is it just doesn't happen overnight. So what's the process that you can actually use? So this was the our belief is that everyone needs a personal brand, and it's more than just your resume or a bio. The book, The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman, one of the founders of LinkedIn, is a great read. I think he really articulates that well about the whole branding, and some of the ideas for this session came out of that. And that's why we did the LinkedIn profile last time. This time we're doing optimizing the career change opportunity. Are you really making sure you're ready for that move and that you manage the process? And then building a network that'll power your future. That's something we're going to be doing in a little bit later in the fall, as well as building, how do you build a personal website that really communicates your expertise. This is particularly, I think, the last one important for younger people because it's a place that you can put all of the experience and capture the things that have happened. It's a little harder when, if you sort of try and dump, 30 years of a career into one website at a time. It's really better to have a simpler thing to start and then build on it. But it's really doable
Yeah,
for everybody.
I'm just curious if anyone here in the audience has their own website right now, or if that's an interest to you. Let us know here so we can kind of know what to
Yeah, perfect.
expect from some people here. No. Yes, awesome, Glenn.
This was a great blog. If it's really time for you to move on, the source in the charts themselves in the recording, you can pick up that Yahoo um, location, but it isn't in detail. But the 6 telltale signs, you can ask your significant other about this. But if your job's making you a jerk, or you're driving loved ones crazy with your complaining, or you're thinking about everything but work, or your industry is on life support, this is a really key one. Companies and industries are changing and moving. I mean, look at the publishing industry. There was two big newspapers sold recently for 10% of the value they would have fetched, 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, these are radical change. And although you see it as a purchase, if you're not involved and it doesn't throw you, but if you're actually in it, you realize there was blood all over the floor in restructuring and people losing their job and cost cutting and process changes, right? And if you don't feel you fit in, and that's a really big thing, don't go into a job you're not going to fit in. And of course, the last one is you'd rather go to the dentist than go to the job. So they're all they're the telltale signs. But one of the things that I realize working over the years is what is a career path. Sometimes people talk about it as if, well, you come out of college and then you go from one job to the next, to the next, to the next, and there's this nice sequence. But in reality, it looks an awful lot more like this. And you need to be thinking about taking sometimes lateral moves or moves that some people might even require going back a step. Because what you want to do is gain the skills and experience. And sometimes it's balancing the other aspects of your life at a particular point in time in your life, balancing but always you've got some set of goals of where you're going. You may not end up exactly where you thought you were, which is what I tried to articulate in this one.
Did anyone relate? Yeah, good.
So what we're going to cover here is why you need to prepare, even if you're happy in your job today. That goes back to what I've been outlining coming in. Things are changing. You can't count on that company necessarily being exactly the same. So even if you're going to stay in the same company, and there are a few that you can stay on for a long time, most executives I work with that are moving realize that the job they take is an 18 to 36-month job, probably around 24, and then they're going to move to something else, either inside the company or more likely out, just because of the way companies actually work so much now. I'm going to talk about the 3 questions you need to answer in a job interview. There's lots of periphery stuff around, but there are 3 critical questions. And so how do you actually prepare for this change? Not just let it happen to you, but really be ready for it. And how can you really ace that hiring process when you're going through it? Now, there's many burning platforms I've mentioned. One, you're downsizing, or we call it a soul-sucking job you want to get out of. Um, and some of you might give me some examples in the chat room of just where you've had soul-sucking jobs, but many people have. Bryce and Michelle put together this great video on My Careertopia, which is just a series that I think just really captures what it's like, how you feel when the job you've gotten is soul sucking or no longer really meeting what you need. Um, you know, you've been doing some job for X years, but now you want to go in a new direction. One of the things is if you've been in a job for a long time, people will come to you thinking, well, this is obviously what you should do. So they're going to, yeah, data entry for the BC lottery. Glenn, that's right. Oh, I ran a key punch department. It shows how old I am, but I ran one once. What a, what a soul sucking job. You know, at least it would be
Yeah.
for me. You know, the point here is you need to, if you're going to change careers, go from one type of job to another, particularly if you're a little bit older, you've got to be well prepared for that and build the network and the people you need to see because that's a change and people sort of have, they put you in a little frame and say, okay, that's Frank or that's Bill, that's Mark, and therefore that's just what they do. And what you're really talking about here is how do you make that significant change that you now realize you want. And that's that one of those lateral lines I said on that career path. And sometimes it's just you suddenly realize you got this incredible passion and you want to express it. You may not have realized it. Often coming out of college, you take a job that you have to take because you got to pay back debt and stuff like that, you know. So you're tired of large corporate politics. This is, I mean, dealing with the big matrix with a bigger company is something that many people really thrive in. But many don't. Many are going to thrive more in a smaller, more agile organization. And you need to really self-assess, where do I fit? What kind of an organization do I want? Given that you're probably going to have to stay for 12 to 36 months in a job you go into, you want to think these things through in advance before you get there. So, this is, you've got a bunch of skills and experience, and probably a resume of some kind, and that got you to this point. You're in this little interview. So, what are the questions that are the really important ones that are may not be asked directly, but are being asked indirectly, that the person recruiting you or the organization really wants to know? The number one is, will you love the job? The second question on their mind is, can you actually do it? They're different. Whether you love it or can you do it is different. And then the third is, can they actually tolerate working with you? So, um, Josh, I'll come back to that 12 to 36 months again in a minute. So, give me a favor. Why do you think these three questions are so important?
Yeah, I think we even called these the only three questions that you really need to answer in a job
Yeah,
interview.
well, you're going to get a lot of questions that are a bunch of periphery stuff, but in the end of the day, our experience is right now, this is what's going on.
Yeah, they want to see
Yeah,
passion
Gwen,
for the
good
job.
point. They relate
That
to engagement and they're real predictors of success, Josh. You've got it. The point is, when you're hiring someone, you're not hiring to a job where you don't need them. You're hiring them to a job where you do need them. And in many cases, particularly if it's a more senior position, like you're not right out of college, but later on, you're getting your second or third or fourth job. Those jobs, when they're hiring somebody in it, there's problems in those jobs and they're not absolutely sure how the job's going to be done, but they're hiring a good person they figure could do it. But if you don't love the job, people are smart enough now. If you just there for the paycheck, you won't have that extra edge. Gwen used the word engagement, which I think is really key. You know, you're not going to drive yourself to become more productive and advanced, right? You know, as Gwen says, they cover aptitude and attitude kind of coming together, because you may be able to do the job, but Willie, if you don't love it, you're not going to give that extra edge. And what we want as an employer is somebody that's really passionate that are doing it. Then, the last point, will you tolerate working with you? That's a really key one because we've all hired for skill. They call it hire for skill and fire for attitude. Because if you just aren't somebody that can get along either with the hiring executive or more likely the whole hiring team, very few jobs are completely structured where the only person that counts is your boss. You really have a whole
and
group of people around you there. So those three questions are absolutely key. And then, of course, as
yeah, and I know you've been helping clients go through this whole process before. Are there any good examples of how you've helped someone go through this
Yeah,
interview
the
process and
well,
how they use
well, the
this to
funny thing
get a
is,
job or something?
yeah, Bryce, when I'm working with a senior client, I can ask these questions to them, but it's framed just something, you know, I mean, I would ask them, well, why would you love this job? What's causing you to be interested in this? And if they tell me, oh, well, the compensation's good, or it's the stuff like that, I keep pushing them deeper, getting them to actually think it through. Because one of the things that happens, they may actually love the job, but if you're not ready, when you get sort of an oblique question to actually answer that properly, you're not going to communicate that, and you could easily lose the job. One of the things I say to executives now, it's a funny line I use, but I say, how would you really like to date three women simultaneously? When was the last time you did that? If it's a guy or three guys or three or four, and of course they look at me, well, we don't do that, and I'm saying, well, actually, when you're in the recruiting game today, most organizations, particularly if they're using recruiters, either internal or external, would like to see three relatively equal candidates. Well, if you bring three relatively equal candidates together, then it becomes something like a beauty contest, as I say, and one person is going to get the job out of the three, and they could all be equally qualified. And if you're one of them, the difference can easily be because you're not even going to be on the list if you can't do the job and they can't tolerate you. So the differentiating question will be, do you love the job? So making sure you can articulate that. And don't confuse the fact that as you're going through the interview process, you've got another question you're answering that you've got to think about, and that is, can you tolerate working for them? Because what you don't want to do is say, well, I need a job, I got to get out of where I am, and so you rush to go work somewhere else, and then you wake up and say, what the devil have I done here? This is not really exciting me or what I really want. So how do you do that, right? So it's the so you're evaluating that, but don't allow your thinking and evaluation on that to cloud the fact that you're in a selling situation about showing some enthusiasm for the job and the interviews. And of course, that's about researching the job, researching the people you're going to work with, and adapting yourself to conversations with them. What I always say to someone I'm working with, it's what you want to do is not confuse accepting or rejecting the job with getting the offer. In many cases, as they go out into the recruiting process, what you want to do is actually practice the first few times. You're practicing getting offers, making sure that you can present yourself and evaluate situations to go after. You may not take the first one or two that come to you, because in the end, the final offer, because it's always after the mating dance has gone on for a while, you get a final offer. And I know in the two big client situations I've been dealing with recently, that happened. You get down, and then there's another month where you're going back and forth on title and contract and complete scope and who reports to you and all that stuff, and access to the board and stuff like that. So that's a good question. Now, here's three questions that I think you in an interview you could ask. They're going to ask you lots and you answer, but in some form or other, if you ask these three questions, what do you think the impact would be? If you said, now tell me a bit, if this job did not actually exist, why would you create it? What are the key roles in the job? What are the key metrics? Now, if you're applying for a job that's, like a call center, a job like that, it's going to be different a level. But particularly in a little more senior job, there's a lot of ambiguity in jobs. So if you ask these questions, what do you think the implications would be?
Yeah.
Good point from both Ryan and Gwen. You can't possibly be successful in a job if you don't know the key metrics, what the job's all about. And it's amazing the number of times people say, I'm going to hire a director of sales or something, and when you get into it and you understand what they're doing, they're actually looking for somebody that does, market development or business development. Could be something very, very different. And so by not just making assumptions about what the job is and what they're talking about, this allows you to probe a little bit, because if the job's not right for you, this is part of your scanning, but you're also demonstrating uh, some competence to the other person in the sense that you're getting them to think, and then you can adapt it to them. And now Josh's point, you've got choices. It goes both ways. This is Every interview is an opportunity to get information from them. So, but you want to do it in a way that still communicates that you got passion, that you could do the job, um, and by asking questions. Have you ever remember the crazy old? There's an old story about a guy that goes in and talks to, like, he meets this other person, and so all he does is ask questions, and the other person talks for 90% of the time. The other person leaves that meeting and immediately goes to a friend and says, "They just met this other guy," and he's a great conversationalist because people enjoy talking. When you ask a lot of questions, you bring out the best in people, and they actually attribute all kinds of things to you. So that's why going into interviews, um, it's an excellent idea to have a set of questions, and you can have some specific about the company, but these are pretty generic questions. But here's another question set. If you said to a potential employer or a recruiter you're talking to, and if you, particularly the employer is more important than if you're dealing with an external recruiter, but an internal recruiter it would work, and just phrase it slightly differently. If you said, if you hire me and we were meeting like this in 12 months, and on reflection you think I was the best hire you've ever made, how would you know? So, what do you think about that question? Why would I ask that question?
In a similar vein to another question I've heard you bring up before is if you're getting hired by the person you'd actually report to and you'd be working under, um, then a good question to ask them is how can I make you successful to your managers or your direct
Yeah.
reports if you were to hire me?
Yeah, the closer you are to the hiring manager, the more powerful this one is. And Josh is right. This defines success, but it does another thing. It taps into the emotion and the wisdom of that individual. And that's very powerful, because as they start articulating that, you are learning something. You're learning, could you actually do those things? And what I find amazing in using this question myself in terms of a recruiting a job, think of it as that way. I use this question, and what I discover is that often what people really count as success are auxiliary things that are really important to them. They don't think they're important enough to answer them on the previous question as, here's a critical metric of success. But when you ask the question this way, they tell you what's important to them. It could be something about, you get that everybody's getting along in my department, because you find out they're hiring somebody new because they had to fire the other guy before because he was destroying the morale of the organization or something. But the job appears to be a very specific job. So this can allow you to tap into those, gives you some extra things to go for that maybe could be quick hits that you could really do, and do successfully, and then do even more. The other thing is, when you ask this question and they answer, they attribute to you wisdom, and they attribute to you the ability to actually do what they express to you. This is a derivation of questions that Dan Sullivan, a guy he's been my coach for years. He runs a company called the Strategic Coach in Toronto and Chicago, and he's got wrote a little book on Amazon called The Dan Sullivan Question, and it's a little quick read, an hour and a half read, but in it he has many derivations of this. Derivations, not sure what the right word is, but modification, like alternatives to this question in different circumstances, which I think are really powerful in terms of how do you really interact well with somebody else. But this is really about the recruiting situation and changing jobs. So these are really critical ones. Yeah, that's good, Glenn. So, what's your biggest? Let's turn it over to you guys for a thing. If you wanted to get a new, bigger, more attractive position right now, and maybe you're happy right now, but if you wanted to, just dream along with a little bit here. You know, what's the biggest challenge?
Good, good.
Good point, Josh. You've got to do some self-reflection. You got to define it properly yourself to know it when it's coming up. The you know, Tom, your point is really many people don't get over the inertia until some major crap happens at the current organization they're at. It could be you losing your job, but it may not be. It could just be, a new manager comes in or they shake the place up or they lay off people that you work with or things. All sorts of things can happen. It really changes. And Mark's point is, connecting with the right opportunity. There's a key component here of how are you making sure you are uh, being exposed to the right opportunity. And that's part of the process I'm going to lay out for you in a minute.
Excellent.
Yeah, Gwen's got a good point. Sometimes, and in organizations in the past, and I don't have a lot of experience. I know I had many years with IBM when they were growing at 25% a year, Gwen, and we had a super opportunity then that we could really just redefine a job for ourselves, sell it to somebody, and go start doing it, and everybody would get excited and it would move forward. I suspect that's a little tougher now, but not always.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, guys. It's
Oh,
great
these are
feedback.
really good. Yeah, Ryan's point, confidence is absolutely critical. You've got to believe. If I read a great article just came out recently. These guys have done research over the years in thousands of situations, and executives that have failed and not failed, and managers that have failed, and they concluded that the number one criteria for success is confidence. And we know that confidence is a learnable skill. It's something that you can practice and work on yourself. I'm going to show you a couple of tools coming up in a minute. Absolutely key, because if you're not confident, the odds of you pulling it off, it goes back to that question is, would you love to do the job? If you come across as not confident, one, it kind of negates your skills and experience question, but it also comes across as you wouldn't necessarily be passionate because confidence seems to come with passion. I don't mean cocky, but confident.
No, and that's a good point. Jim, when you hired me to do the marketing here, how much of the stuff that I'm currently doing did I know how to do or had done in the past before coming on board with you?
We didn't even hire you to do this. Go
I
back to
know.
somebody else. You
Uh,
invented this
but
job, Bryce. It better work out. You're doing really well at it.
but
No, that's
it's
true.
just to show you, Ryan.
Well, we used all the assessments, job match to the personality, because in a small organization, where we're less than 10 employees, what really counts is how somebody new coming in meshes with the personalities and the style and the work habits of everybody else, and then do they have some unique skill that they can add that would be different?
No, and yeah, actually, that's a really good point. One of the other things that we do here at Balanced Work Life and with My Careertopia is a thing called growth curve, and we've learned a lot about all the different skills and things that companies are looking for in a person and hiring at different levels of growth. So if they're at 10 to 25 employees, like Jim said, they're not really looking for someone who has all the skills sets that match exactly for a T what they need. They're looking a lot for those matches on a behavior and personality side that will mesh with the team and shows the eagerness to grow and gain those skills.
Mm.
And it goes like that
Yeah.
for a lot of these companies. You don't necessarily that confidence that you have the skills to learn those things that you need to do in that job and have had some experience in that kind of arena, maybe not specifically doing that particular skill, doesn't mean that you should just feel like you're helpless and there's no way you can do those kind of jobs. Yeah.
So here's the process that I want you to think about doing, and then I'll break down in each step. If you're going to actually be ready, change ready, I'm saying wherever you are now, sometimes you might start this because you've just been laid off or something, as my client that just got the big job. We started this process quickly, 4 or 5 months ago because that's where he was. But in most cases, you people are already working. That's the ideal place to be looking for the new job inside the current company with another one. The first thing I'd like each of you to consider doing is you've got to update your goals. Because if you don't know where you're going, all roads lead you there. And it's also very hard for you to really pick out opportunity as it comes along. Then the second is take a real hard look at your own exceptional talents because we're all very, very good at certain things, but not so good at others. And given that you go into a job, and if it takes you, in normal parlance, it takes you about 6 months to get ready, and normally it'll take people uh, 12 months to get into a new job, and it takes another 12 months in the middle to really produce in that job. That's Josh, you asked the question earlier. That's where I get this, you know, 18 to 24 month cycle for people in a job. In many cases, companies think their cycle is longer, but actually, people who are leaving have been looking for a job for the last 12 months. So their decision to leave occurs sometime after the first year. So if you're hiring people, if you're getting people on the team, you want to get them engaged and enthusiastic so that you get more out of them in that window. But you also have to recognize that companies change, and if you're really successful, you can normally outgrow a job in 2.5 to 3 years. That's a fairly lengthy time to actually produce real results, and then you're ready to move on. Now, that might be in the same company. That could be reinventing a little promotion change, and promotion sometimes comes just as additional responsibility. But you're not going to do that if you're not in your talent zone. What will happen is you'll always drag down on your productivity. The other thing is, and this will lead very much to confidence, you really do have to know yourself, understand others, and build great relationships. And that's the perfect career. But it's about knowing where you've really done well in the past and being able to try and figure out how do you duplicate that. Because if you list everything that's really worked for you in the past and on job situations that haven't and understand them, and a little bit of coaching can or self-coaching can get you to do that. Those little images across there are out of the lead-in for the Careertopia. Those were the kind of the courses that were there that we put together for knowledge workers. And then you need some selection criteria, and I'll show you how that's actually used. There's a whole bunch of ways you can go through because you really need to reflect with checklists and ideas about, well, given my goals, given my talents, given understanding myself, given I understand what's really worked for me in the past, how should I be evaluating a job I'm going to consider getting in the future? What job should I be looking for? What are the key criteria for that job? And distilling that down to the vital few. Then the next step is actually doing an evaluation. I call it a Venn diagram in which you rate your current situation. And you should always, once you've got your selection criteria, rate exactly how would you rate the current job. And that'll normally flush out what's bothering you about this job or why you've got aspirations for something better. Sometimes when you look at that, you can actually see opportunities to enhance or improve the job you're in. So this is a good exercise to be doing in that cycle. And then finally, what you got to do is focus your networking because you kind of become who you hang out with. If you've decided to do a career change or a shift, what you need to do a year in advance is start hanging out with people that are in the area you want to go to. You can't wait till you're unemployed, if you like, and you need another job, and you sort of have, a mark on your forehead and you're going around. That's a lot harder. It's also harder to maintain your confidence in that situation. So doing it in this
Yeah.
order in advance is really key, right?
And that goes back to the comment earlier from Mark about get it being in those positions to find those opportunities for the next big thing. A lot of that comes down to your network.
Yep. So goals and dreams. From a recruiting perspective, we all have, whether we write them down or not, we've got workbooks and techniques to do this, but we all should have some very lifetime goals, longer term goals that span multiple jobs we might have in the future, potentially multiple companies that we should work for. And they're normally about longer life, health, financial security, legacy, the family linkage and issues like that. It could be self actualization, but they're a little fuzzier and they're more directional. Then there are 3-year goals. These are goals that you could specifically write down as a SMART goal with a measurement. So at the end of 3 years, you'd be able to tell whether you accomplished it. Over a 3-year period, these goals need to be balanced so they're tracking you towards your lifetime goals. You need those 3-year goals set to evaluate career change opportunity. 90-day goals can be completely unbalanced because they're just, you've got a few things in front of you. How are you going to really accomplish those and focus on those? And so it's encouraging you to do those 3-year goals. And are, now, what can happen when this is an actual sample set that came out with one of my clients, when I distilled down working with them over a couple of sessions, um, what would he be able to do if all his dreams came true? Because given that you don't change jobs that often, I mean, even people may say changing, every 2 to 3 years is rapid, but you're going to do that anyway. But it's still a significant time. But is it heading you where you want to go? So having this clear in his mind, and this individual wanted this to be the case. He wanted to be running a successful business. He wanted to actually have a team of people that he could coach and develop. He wanted more time with industry influencers. He wanted to stay away from corporate politics and have more time with customers. He wanted to manage a whole big group of people that he could actually just interface with as a leader. And he wanted some real positive time with Wall Street executives and be sitting on the boards of other companies. So that became his criteria list for the specific kinds of jobs that he was going out to look for. Um, but personally, you always want to track what else, because a job can also, some jobs can give you more self-satisfaction on the professional sense, but not the remuneration sense. Some jobs you can be much more successful, but at least temporarily, you're going to work 80 hours a week and travel 50% of the time. So what is it that you really want? And be clear on that and make a balanced judgment upon the job that you're really going after. You know, we're all born with batteries. But what happens is as you grow and develop, you come up with specific things that you are much better at. I remember we have a little tool. It's an online tool that allow you to identify in a work context what your exceptional talents are. I used to actually have a card sort version of it that I used when I started my initial coaching, or we
Yeah,
automated it.
and for the people who don't really, for people who don't know what you mean by exceptional talents, can you kind of give them an idea of what that is?
Well, what are the things that you do really, really well? Some people are fabulous public speakers. They love to get up. That's an exceptional talent. Other people just don't do that well. So if a job requires that, then and you've got it, you're going to thrive more in that job. Whereas if you don't, you're going to have to find another way to do it. But people that are great presenters don't necessarily they may not necessarily be great at creating presentations and decks. I remember one client I worked with came to this conclusion, and so that caused him to hire a director of marketing who was also a presentation and speech writer and somebody that booked him up so that he spoke at a whole bunch of industry gigs using his talent, promoting his company, thriving in doing it and building his brand. But right behind him was a guy that made sure he had the presentations, had the content, and had the booking. That's about building a talent team around you. That makes sense, Bryce?
Yeah, yeah, because you don't really need to be good at everything. A
No.
lot of people feel they have to have a wide variety of talents and all those different things, but you found with your clients and a lot of executives that you coach that it's the ones that are successful are the ones that focus on the ones that they're really good at and they enjoy doing, right?
Yeah, we've identified in a working context, I just on the job as typical knowledge workers, there's about 36 different exceptional talents. And if somebody in mid level career and up, I'm not talking about the specialty skills on the job, but the generic soft skills and what we define as exceptional talents. That if you can just do 8 to 10 of them and stay there, you're going to thrive. You're going to be much better. Because what happens, and I think in the image I was using is this one, Michael Jordan. Remember, Michael was extraordinary as a basketball player. He was, but he decided he was such a great athlete, he was going to go off and play baseball. But he never really got out of the minors in baseball. It wasn't that he's not an extraordinary athlete. Doesn't have all he has all the right mental attitudes, but there's just something he just didn't quite have that edge in that one. And that's an example of do you really want to play outside your talent zone? Now maybe he wanted to for self-actualization, everything that's great, but as you get into business, sometimes today business and organizations are ruthless. You get outside your talent zone and you have a couple of off years and you get shelved and it's a struggle to get back, to get another job back in your own talent zone. So this is increasingly, I think, a really key thing to
That's a
be
great
thinking
point.
about. So what do you see when you look in the mirror? Because, you can see a pussycat, or you can see a lion. How do you really make sure that you've got unstoppable confidence? One of the things is you have to measure and progress not on some ideal, not on looking at your career and saying, well, I want to be a CEO, president of a company in 10 years or 20 years. And the only thing that counts every year is, have I made that job yet? Because if you only measure your progress against the ideal that you set, you're doing something called being in the gap, but there's always a gap between your ideal and where you actually are. That drives down your confidence and actually makes it harder for you to really proceed because you thrive by taking what's working for you and doing more of that. So that's why we really encourage everybody to stop every once in a while and look backwards to say, how did we get here? What's really working for us? Because what's really working for us is what's going to take us that next step. Because this perception of this and looking at it this way is what drives confidence, happiness, and energy. And it's what's going to give you that sense of confidence and I could really do the job if you're in this interview situation.
Can you give an example of like the actual two spot? What would be like using your example of the ideal of being a CEO? What should you be measuring yourself by
Well, you
so you
should be
don't
measuring your
fall in this gap?
well, you're measuring yourself on the progress, Bryce. Like in your case, you say how have you significantly enhanced your skills and capability in the last 2 years? You don't turn around and measure yourself against the future. You're looking backwards and saying, look at this, I've become an expert in Infusionsoft. I've had all these articles on Huffington Post and these different places. So you're looking back at what you did because you realize, hey, I'm going to do more of that. That's really successful. Now, you're reflecting to say, are those things taking you towards the goal you wanted? That's true. But they're still the things that are going to take you forward. Don't focus on what you didn't do. Because people that are only in the gap all the time are ones that are perpetually unhappy. You know, they, um, they made 125% of their quota, but they really wanted 200. So they're discouraged and down. How did being discouraged and down help you to be successful the next go round?
Oh, that's great. That helps a lot.
We've got some simple forms, and what Laurie Driver is doing in our office right now is she's taking all the forms and the stuff I put together that we've used for clients, which are really coaching tools that you go through, and you just ask questions and you fill them out. But you could do this on your own, is what our thinking is. And so you get people to reflect, and one of the things to reflect on is what are your key past experience? If you look at career change, what are the jobs that you ran or the positions you had that gave you the greatest sense of satisfaction. They were the really positive ones. And then reflect about why things were really important. And then what advancement, how could you leverage that past experience when you go forward, and what specific action could you use? This is an example from somebody that I worked with, except I had to take a whole bunch of stuff out because there was too much information in there that kind of shows who they are. But it's just, then I realized it looks kind of simple. But it's a core of a tool just causing you to reflect. This is about looking backwards, Bryce. It's saying, this guy ran a whole education function for a major sales. That was more important than the jobs he had in sales and in sales management. But then he got a chance to run a whole major division in a company. And then he had a huge geographic sales territory job. Then he went out, joined a startup, and actually took the company public. And so each of those experiences are what framed him as what made him. And now when he looks at his 3-year long-term goals, he can decide how can he take those skills and experience forward? How does that cause him to think about the next job that he should really have? So this was the process that we're on. So I've shown you a little bit about goal update, a bit about exceptional talent, knowing yourself. Now, what about criteria? So what we have is all sorts of checklists and questions and stuff that we've used over the years. We're going to bundle all this into a template for you to use. But when you think about companies, companies don't last that long. You can join a company that's a market leader, industry leader, one that if you look at the finances of the company, there's a great slideshare thing I was looking at the other day that went through and described exactly how to manage or measure the financials of an organization. And if you send me an email, I'll send you a link to it. But it allows you to identify whether a company you're considering partnering with or going to work for, and you are partnering when you go to work for, and those organizations, do they actually have the financial wherewithal to invest in you and invest in the business and likely be successful? Because you join a losing team and you're probably going to lose anyway. So this is a key part. Before you ever get into the interview cycle, who are you really working for? Does the company have excellent brand recognition, market share? These are all good questions. The SlideShare was just about measuring or evaluating their actual financials. What's the culture? Can I stomach working for these guys? Understanding that, talking to other people that work there, that's really key. Leadership and working styles. What kind of a leader do you want? If you've had experience with abusive bosses that drive you absolutely crazy because you just don't work well in that tension, then you want to make sure you don't go to work for another one. I mean, this is just because I want to get rid of this situation, and don't be fooled by the guy's a nice guy when you find a little about him, or you're being hired by somebody else. Check out who you're going to work for, what is it going to be like. You can do that evaluation normally and figure something out in advance. So there's compensation. So there's actually literally hundreds of these questions that we have, and we found them from very many sources plus all our own experience. Now what happens is, here's a good one. I mentioned the Venn diagram. Here's an actual, doctored up a little bit to make it easy, but a key point I want to make, where somebody came up with a series of these were the absolute top criteria for them in selecting a job. I got them to actually agree on a scale of a 1 to 10, and you only got items of 5 because the other ones we dropped below 5. But these are a ranked priority sequence that they really wanted. Then in their current position, I get them to give an evaluation of the company. And then they've got this individual is looking at 2 options, but often there's 3 or 4 over time. And then go down and score those. And you notice there are some that you can't score. And so here's what's really interesting about this. This is not something that you add up the score and say, that's probably the company I'll join. The real power in this as an evaluation technique and as a tool to use is in the yellow, in the question marks. Because when I'm talking to someone about their position and where they're going and how they're evaluating this, when I get this criteria and then they give me a question mark, that is where you should do some research. Because if you said, that the ability to make their own decisions about a team, to be able to recruit the people you want, If that was absolutely critical to you and you don't know the answer to that for a specific situation, make sure you ask the right questions or you get some outside advice. Talk to other people that work there. You want to find the answers to those questions. Otherwise, you join a company because, and remember, towards the end, they're selling you. And so it looks great, and there you go, and then you realize, oh my God, I forgot that this wasn't going to be true, and I didn't ask those questions, right? Because they didn't bring it up necessarily. So this is your criteria. You don't have to show them the criteria, but if you already know the answer to certain, just look at the yellow ones and make sure you bore down on those if it's really important to you. You can also get completely confused with too much data, and that previous chart I said the checklists are pretty broad. The whole point is how do you boil it down to about this size? And then this allows you to move to your next step, which is really all about networking. You know, you kind of become, I think I've got a chart here, you become who you hang out with. So you need to, once you know what you want, know the kind of jobs you want, are you actually networking with the right people? Have you added the right people to your LinkedIn? Are you able to call out to find people? Because when you get an opportunity in an industry, you want to be able to go talk to a couple of other people in that industry or close to that company or in that company. If you're interested in going to work for a company, start linking with the people in the company to start with so you find out whether it's what you think it is. So that those were the steps. But of course, how do you connect all these dots? And we had this 1 hour workshop that we thought would be helpful, and it's going to be recorded so you can send links to your friends or look at it again yourself if it like. But here's a couple of things. One is Lori, with Bryce's help, has put together a little ebook called "Oops, I Lost My Job," and it's a little different. It's a little unique. It's a journal style of writing, which we really believe really appeals a lot to young knowledge workers and get you going. And inside it, we're going to publish the beginning of it, and then if based on the response, if everybody buys it and gets excited about it, then we've got some other chapters that you'll automatically get and stuff. And so it's going to link to all the e-courses, the assessments, the tools, but it gives you sort of a starter kit to get going, but quick and easy to get going. So that's one thing that we wanted to offer you. And
Just
so go ahead, Bryce.
yeah, just to give you an idea what it's about. It's kind of like think of we thought the best way to really help people going through a career change or through planning for a career change, whether it's expected or unexpected, is to really get in the mind of someone who's doing that. So this is the journal of someone who's basically been let go without much notice. What are they going to do next? What's the process they're going to go through? How do they interact with their spouse? Bring it up, and all that kind of all those things that you dread of thinking about, but you know is probably important for you to at least have a plan for in case that happens, or in case you really do want to kind of start planning your next change. Um, and like Jim said, it's not. This is something that we're going to add to over time. So you can buy it for $5.95, but you're going to get more as we go, and it's going to be influenced a lot on what you guys give us for feedback. If there's a particular challenge you want us to cover in a career redesign, or like Jeannie, you mentioned earlier, you're 40, you've been an OR nurse all this time, and you feel it's a bad fit. Um, that would be a great example for us to kind of go into and okay, this guy's we can write that into the story and what you would do in that situation. So we really do want a lot of feedback on this thing. It's kind of an experiment, but we think it'll be really fun and a great way to kind of interact with all of you.
Thanks, Bryce. There's also another good website for particularly middle managers. But you know what I like about it's called Ladders. And it has a, if you subscribe to Ladders, the guy's a very good writer, or they have a number on staff, and they publish a great blog that comes out as a kind of an email list, but it gives you lots of really good, insightful ideas about what's going on in the mind of recruiting, of hiring executives, and just thought processes about how to maximize your career success. Called ladders.com. The other one is if you email me, I'll arrange somebody on my staff will actually reach out to you. We'll give you a 30-minute free consultation to identify what you might do. and we can provide it, or we'll give you some advice about how you can do it yourself. Um, because we realize that this is an interesting area, and some people have the financial wherewithal to get full coaching, which we do offer, and so we can do that as well. But we're also very interested in trying to figure out how can we help people. And really, the whole thing behind mycareertopia.com was to provide a series of e-courses and things where self-help essentially. It's really a balancing act because like I know that if you have somebody helping you, you can speed it up, but sometimes that's just not affordable. So we're trying to figure out in this whole technique here, how do we balance that out to help as many people as we can. So encourage you. I'm really hoping a bunch of you will actually buy our little our little ebook because we're so much looking forward to getting your feedback and ideas because we're experimenting here as well. What can we do? How can we reach out and help people best? It's always good to put a little price on something because then you kind of find out if people are serious and then get the reaction and then we're talking to the people that really care. So that's our theory anyway. We'll see how it all works. Bryce, you got any final comments? We're wrapping up. It's 10:01. I
No.
want to
Yeah, I
thank
just
all of
want
you
to take.
very much for coming
You're
on.
not. Yeah, I just want to say this is a great opportunity for anyone here to ask Jim a question. He's an executive coach. He's worked with hundreds of clients, very prestigious companies that they've all been through. So he knows a lot. He came from IBM, worked there for 25 plus years or something like that.
Hey, don't make me old.
So
I
he has a
worked there for
lot
a few
of
years.
knowledge.
That's what I like to say. Maureen had a good question. The exceptional talent list, Maureen. Anyone sends me an email, I can send you a list of what they are. But there's actually a tool online we have that allows you to identify what yours are. But it's really the same list. I can share the list with you. And this
Yeah,
list is,
email us.
yeah, I have your email, I believe, Maureen, so I can
Don't
send
be
that.
afraid. I'll put mine in here too.
Yeah,
So everyone has my contact
yeah.
information.
Contact Bryce or myself.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Yeah, contact us with anything. Don't.
And
Love
also let us
hearing from
know if
you.
you like this format, if we're doing a good job on this one or not. Obviously, we know how busy people are, and it's really tough. I noticed a real buddy of ours who's done a great job on the happiness author called The Happiness Advantage, and he's running three big webinars to launch. He's got a whole new book, and he's charging $25 for the webinar, and then you get a copy of his new book, and you get the webinar and stuff like that, and the recording. But he's running them on Sunday night and Monday night at I think 8 o'clock at night or something, which is kind of interesting. A thought process. We love your thing is because these are interesting webinars, but we're doing them during the workday. And it occurred to me just a while back, somebody actually sent me a note saying, I'd love to attend because I'd actually like to get out of my soul sucking job, but I can't actually take time off during the workday to watch something like this. And anyway, I'm in a public space, so I sent them back a note saying, hey, you can you can watch the recording at home, right? Yeah, that's interesting, Jenny. Yeah, maybe do it at maybe we'll do the value based networking one off hours, Bryce. Have a look and survey a couple of other people and see if that works because we can certainly make it happen. Good thing about this is we can run this one. Like right now, I'm in Los Angeles. Bryce is back in our office in Arizona. You know, you can really make it work. Thanks, Dara. Glad we gave you a few nuggets. Good show. Yeah, it's nice to have a supportive manager. Gwen, that's good. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much. Well, Maureen's got a typing something. We'll listen to people. We don't want to leave if people want to tell us something. This is great. You're welcome, Maureen. This is great. Yeah, Josh. If you're still there, yeah, we'll. I'm back in Arizona a week after next. I'll send you a link. Maybe we can hit a local coffee shop. That would be great. The just here we bought a second home in California, so I'm just here arranging for renovations and decorating and stuff like that. So I have lots of dust in my nose. Bye all. All righty. This is good. Oh, Dara's got a final comment. Bye bye. Good show. Okay, guys. Take care. Thanks, Bryce. You want to stop the recording?
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.